I'll just a reminder that we're going to be recording today's webinar. So if you're not happy being recorded, there's an option to leave the meeting. Hopefully you will receive that notification to let you know that we are recording and that this webinar will be available on the Youth Link Scotland website and our YouTube channel for anyone who's not available to come stay to be able to access this as a resource. And I'll share that recording with you at the end of the webinar. I'll just go through a bit of the agenda for this evening. So we'll start off with a bit of an icebreaker, and then I'll introduce the Our Bright Future project and explain a little bit about what youth governance means in this context. We've got 4 speakers joining us today. Unfortunately, our 5th speaker from Nature Scott has come down with an illness and she isn't able to make it today, but considering we've got 90 minutes and 4 speakers who are here to talk about all of the fantastic work they're doing around youth governance, I think we'll have plenty of content to take us through to 6:30 when this webinar finishes. Once all of the speakers have had a chance to talk about youth governance in the context of their own organisations, we'll then have an opportunity for a Q&A with all 4 speakers. So if you do have any questions as they present, do save those to the end for the Q&A. And we'll also have a bit of a break in between as well. We'll give you 10 minutes to sort of stretch your legs in between the speakers. So we'll kick off with a bit of an icebreaker. We would like you to post in the chat box where your favourite place is outdoors, just to get a little feel for the kind of spaces that you're all enjoying at the moment. Your favourite place to be in nature. Okay, so we've got the Lake District, the sea, the forest, the beach, lots of beaches. Any specific beaches? I'm a big fan of the East Lothian coastline at the moment. I've been doing lots of beaches along there, which I've been enjoying. Any kind of water, walks along the river, climbing, that's a good one. Got a lot of places to add to my list to visit. Great. Perfect. Well, thanks for sharing all of those, those amazing outdoor places. Great. Just to start with a bit of background to the Our Bright Future project. Our Bright Future are partners with Youth Link Scotland who've supported the webinar today. They're a UK-wide coalition of organisations led by the Wildlife Trusts. And they aim to tackle the challenges of the climate and the nature emergencies, as well as the growing mental health crisis for young people and high levels of unemployment among 16 to 25-year-olds. And the Our Bright Future programme runs 31 individual projects across the UK, and they've engaged with over 100,000 young people, aiming to get young people out in nature, learning new skills, protecting our environment and feeling the mental health benefits of the work that they're doing as well. And the projects are all youth-led and they focus primarily on 3 asks. So the first ask is all around learning in and about nature. Their second ask is supporting young people to get into green jobs. And the third ask is for young people to be heard and play an active role in society. And today's webinar will focus mainly on ask 3, ensuring young people are heard in the decision-making process and that they play an active role in society. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the climate situation and the kind of action that needs to be taken. Over the last year, the IPCC, which stands for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has published its latest report summing up the scientific consensus on climate change impacts, adaptation and mitigation. And you might remember the headlines from when the first part of this report came out last summer, which labelled it as a code red for humanity. And the warnings from the rest of the report are just as stark, showing that up to 3.6 billion people globally live in contexts that are highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and that greenhouse gas emissions are still rising and are currently higher than they've ever been. And the window to take action to reduce these emissions and limit warming to the globally agreed target of 1.5 degrees is rapidly closing. And the latest installment of the report stated that we need to make unprecedented reductions to our emissions by 2030 if we can to be able to stay within these limits. As well as this, with an unstable economic and political situation, from rising costs of living and energy prices to the invasion of Ukraine and the current UK government crisis, there is a risk that climate action will be sidelined. So in order to achieve our targets, we really need systemic change within every sector of society to be working together. Engaging young people, businesses, the media, communities, politicians, and decision makers is really vital to reach our targets, which is why it's really important that young people are working in all sectors to keep climate change at the forefront of their work. And young people's mobilization around the world and contribution to tackling climate change shows the massive power they possess to hold decision makers accountable, which is why it's so vital that the environmental and the youth work sectors embrace the value that young people can play in government and governance roles related to climate social action, so they can make decisions about the climate that will ultimately be affecting their own future. And just a little bit of introduction into what youth governance is in this context. It ultimately comes down to young people and adults working together in positions of authority to make decisions and take action to strengthen organizations, communities, and society. And participation is a fundamental right, and through active participation, young people are empowered to play a vital role in their own development as well as their communities. And the YouthLink Scotland and Our Bright Future projects aim to highlight how all young people have a right to have their voice heard on matters that affect them. And there's a really great resource that's been created by Our Bright Future and YouthLink Scotland, which will be linked in the chat box, which highlights ways that young people can get involved in politics specifically. So it's really important that we give current and future generations a voice in the political decision-making process by encouraging them to directly engage in policy, supporting young people to be active citizens when it comes to tackling the climate emergency. And we have 4 incredible speakers here today who all have experience directly involving young people in policy and decision-making processes related to the climate, or their young people in governance roles themselves. And they're going to share their own personal journeys into youth governance and highlight why it's so vital, and as well as that, share some useful tips and insights into what we can all do to encourage and celebrate more youth governance.